of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great country of ours, welcome to Character Matters with Dr. George Simon. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our day, the defining social issue of our time, character, and why it matters so much, especially to our precious freedoms that we celebrate this weekend most especially. This is our most precious holiday, I suppose you might say, from a patriotic standpoint. This is a time when we commemorate the birth of a nation built on the principle that we can govern ourselves, we can independently take care of ourselves, and we can do so with limited government involvement in our lives. And that, of course, all depends, is all completely predicated on the fact that decent people don't really need oppressive regimes running their lives. Decent, hardworking, responsible, socially conscientious folks, all they need to do is be left alone, and they will prosper. Not only will they prosper, but they will innovate and they will create opportunity for others, and they will make it possible by creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and cooperation. They will make it possible for the country to be great. And this is a great country, but a lot of our greatness has eroded in recent years because of the character crisis that has plagued not only our country, but many free societies or relatively free societies across the world, and not just free societies as well. Character matters more than anything because it matters everywhere. It matters to all of us. And we're going to be talking about some examples of that that were so glaring in this past couple of weeks. You know, not a week goes by where we don't see a pretty glaring example of this problem that we're facing so universally these days, especially here in our home country. But I wanted to take some time to talk about this special time that we commemorate this weekend, our independence. You know, I wrote an article on my blog about this just this past Friday, and I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to go to my website at www.manipulative-people.com. That's my blog. That's not my personal website. That's my blog site, www.manipulative-people.com. I've got an article posted there. It's one of many. I post a similar article every single 4th of July holiday because the interrelationship between freedom and character is so crucial. And we have to come to a better appreciation of that fact. There are some folks who commented on the article that I wrote, making some comments, some very valid comments about this country not always having had such good character. There were times in our history when we really dropped the ball character-wise, when we were not as good as we should have been, collectively and individually, and we paid for it. But there are also times of greatness. Somebody also pointed out that even though the founders had a really noble idea about limited government and about the ability of decent people to govern their own affairs, that not all these founders themselves had all the character that they purported to have. As a matter of fact, many of them endorsed many things that we would think reprehensible today, like the ownership of people. You know, not only the ownership of people, but the belief that it was okay by the tenets of their religion, and okay by their own philosophical outlook about the value of certain human beings. This is an outrageous thought today. So it suffices to say that we haven't always been of the most noble character, and not all of even our key figures have been of the most noble character. But that is irrelevant really to the main issue of how freedom works and how it must work. For freedom to work, and to work well, and for governments not to try and micromanage people's lives by creating law after burdensome law, restricting every movement and intruding into every aspect of people's lives, for that not to happen, people have to have a solid moral foundation. And someone corrected me on this on the blog as a comment to the article that I'd written. They talked about how we're really talking about ethics and not morals, because mores change. You know, norms in different times in various cultures change. So we're not talking about that. We're talking really about ethics, about values and standards, good values, standards, virtues. And when we are virtuous, we don't need folks to micromanage us. Imagine this, folks. Imagine many of you out there I know are responsible folks. Some of you folks listening out there, I kind of know the fan base that I've built, especially on my blogs and in the readership of my books, In Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance and the Judas Syndrome. These are basically decent folks who take matters seriously, who take their own personal responsibilities seriously, and who don't really need to be micromanaged. And imagine these folks needing a law telling them that they should honor and respect a human life, that they should honor and respect their fellow man and fellow men and women, that they should take care of their children, that they should fulfill their civic duties and responsibilities, that they should not lie and cheat and hoodwink and steal. Imagine that they would need to be told to do these things. Most folks who are of decent character don't need to be told these things. They do them as a matter of course. And as a matter of fact, many times they go above and beyond. There's no law mandating, for example, that you recycle. And I know many folks who voluntarily, out of concern for the general welfare of the planet and out of concern for what we are doing to our environment, voluntarily do so because they consider it not only a privilege but a duty to be able to do their part. They're happy to do their part to help preserve this great and wonderful planet that we live on. So they don't need someone telling them to do this. But as folks become more and more irresponsible, as too many of us are irresponsible, there is the constant temptation for government to try and micromanage us by placing on the books more and more burdensome laws. But here's the problem with that, folks. Irresponsible folks never pay attention to those things. They never do. Every single law that's on their books, and believe me, there are hundreds of thousands of them right now. As a matter of fact, there are so many laws on the books right now that I dare say that even the best of us out there, even the most responsible individuals out there have inadvertently broken some rule, have violated some law, probably some law or rule that they didn't even know existed, because that's how many of them are on the books. And you know, of course, as far as crime and punishment goes, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So when you find out that you violated some law, you know, there's going to be some kind of price to pay, generally speaking, whether you knew about it or not. But the fact is, that's a risk all of us run because there are so many laws on the books. But regardless of that, most people don't behave responsibly because there's a law on the books, and every single law that there is depends on the voluntary compliance of those folks who have both a heart and a mind to comply. Every single law that's on the books depends upon the voluntary compliance of righteous people. It's as simple as that. Folks who are hell-bent on doing things their own way, folks that have their own sense of entitlement, their own sense of disregard for the welfare of others, and only their own selfish desires in mind, and are not of the mind and heart to do what's best for the greater good, or have some other nefarious motive involved, or just don't care. These folks are not going to obey or pay heed to anything that we put on the books. So it's just mind-boggling to me that we think that we can legislate our way out of a problem that has only grown worse in the last 20 or 30 years. But this is a point that someone was trying to make in a comment on this article that I wrote on Friday about freedom and character on my blog. And they made the point that we are a nation of laws. That we are a nation of laws. Well, yes, we are. But the laws that we have do not make us great. And we could fashion 100,000 more beautiful laws, and it wouldn't turn us into a greater country. We could mandate, for example, that everyone behave more responsibly with respect to the environment. We could mandate, for example, that everyone behave more responsibly when it comes to their own health, so we don't have these horrendous, uh, huge medical costs driving up the cost of health care for everyone and creating problems within our healthcare delivery and prevention system whereby so many of our lifestyle related diseases could be prevented if we'd only behave a little bit more responsibly. We could do all this, and it wouldn't turn us into a great country. What would turn us into a really, really great country, greater than we already are, is the conversion of individual minds and hearts. We're great collectively when there are more of us who are great individually. We're great as a society when there are more of us individually who care enough to want to do not only what's right for us, but what is right and healthy for the rest of us as well. And you know, it's really not that complicated. Most of us have a pretty good intuitive sense of what would be the righter course, what would be the better course when faced with a choice. We really do. Now, there are those among us, unfortunately, and we're going to get to an example of this in just a moment, but there are, fortunately, those among us who are so disturbed in character, so impaired in their character formation, that they are not only lacking in conscience, but so gravely lacking in conscience that they might not have any conscience at all to speak of. And these individuals with serious character disturbances are the topic of many of my online articles, and also they are the reasons that I wrote my best-selling books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, and Character Disturbance, the Phenomenon of Our Time. I wanted to alert folks to the kinds of impaired characters we have out there so that the average person could be a better judge of character and learn how to avoid those kinds of relationships that are inevitably headed for disaster, for pain and disaster, eventually because of the lack of character development in one of the partners. Well, we had a great, I shouldn't say great, we had a horrendous example of what can go horribly wrong in someone's character development. Once again, this past week, we had an individual who faced a probable cause hearing. I'm sure you read something about it, either on the internet or in the newspaper. Perhaps you heard about it on the television or radio. But there is an individual by the name of Harris. His full name is Justin Ross Harris. And this is a man who, on the surface it appeared, he accidentally left his child in a car seat of his car, which overheated when he was at work, killing the child. And then he discovered it after he left work. And according to some witnesses, he was, of course, beside himself with grief, hollering out in what appeared to be great pain about what he had inadvertently done. However, it didn't take much probing into this case. It didn't take much more scrutiny to show that, in fact, there was much more to this story. That this may be just yet another one of these individuals whom I talk about in my book, Character Disturbance, who may have so little conscience that the only thing that they can really do is feign, F-E-I-G-N, feign civility. A great researcher by the name of Hervé Cleckley wrote a landmark book many years ago, over 60 years ago, called The Mask of Sanity, about individuals that we have alternately given the label psychopath or sociopath. And I'm sorry for the rampant confusion about those terms. I have several blog articles, by the way, about that, and about the mess that we have made, including the mess that many psychologists and other mental health professionals have helped to make by rampantly misusing and alternately using various terms. So I wanted to apologize for the fact that there is an awful lot of confusion out there, an awful lot of misuse, improper use of these terms. But rather than go into detail and clarify all that for you right now, perhaps you can just look up several of my articles either on the www.manipulative-people.com blog site or the www.counseling with 2 L's resource.com website, and you'll find several of the articles I've written on psychopathy. But Cleckley titled the book Mask of Sanity the way he did because he thought that these chameleon-like characters were able to feign sanity, that they were able to appear normal, but they were in fact morally insane. In other words, they were so impaired in conscience that it bordered on a form of insanity, a totally irrational lack of morals, a total irrational lack of ethics, a totally irrational lack of virtue, a complete disregard for the human condition, a completely malignant narcissistic self-love. A narcissistic self-love so malignant that the person only cares for themselves and what they want and has a blatant disregard for everyone and everything else. But they fake it. They can feign what he thought was sanity. What I say is they feign civility. In other words, they can seem like the guy or the woman next door. They can seem like your average Joe or Jean. They can seem like your average person, your average husband, your average father. But the inside, they have so little empathy and so little regard for anything or anyone except their own sweet self, that they're literally capable of anything But we don't know that readily because of this mask that they wear. They can also feign emotions. They know how most people with real consciences and real empathy and real care and concern think and act. They make it a point to observe how other people act and behave. And they basically kind of know what makes people of conscience tick. And they prey on this. Prey. They prey on the fact that most people have qualms, have ethics, have a conscience, have cares and concerns, whereas they care about only one thing, and that is whatever it is that they want. So we look deeper into this case of this so-called distraught father who inadvertently kills his son. And what do we see? Well, once we start looking a little deeper, we find that this is a person who was beginning to have some problems with the idea of being saddled with this child. And he had already been unfaithful in his marriage. And he was in the process of trying to hook up with all kinds of other women, and was in the process of sexting the very precious moments that he was leaving this child in the car. Also, he had researched on the internet how long it would take a body to decompose, how long it would take a child or an animal to die in a hot car. And there's evidence that he even went to the car midway through the day to supposedly check on something, what we don't know for sure. We also know that the child had been dead for some time when he finally returned to the car, and that the stench was overwhelming. Yet he gets in this car and drives it for a period of time before supposedly noticing and getting out of the car and then staging this drama for passersby that he had made a horrible mistake. Drove with this, anyone who's ever, I'll tell you folks, anyone who's ever done any forensic work at all will tell you this. I myself belong to a society of forensic examiners. You'll hear any one of them at conventions tell you the unmistakable, overpowering indication that a life has been extinguished in a closed space. It's something you will never forget, and certainly something you would never overlook. It's not something you wouldn't notice. Yet this man drives and doesn't notice until he's got an audience. Then he does his stage. He does his performance. And of course, many witnesses testify at his hearing. Of course, the judge was not swayed and saw enough cause at least to hold him over, thank goodness. And without bond, thank goodness. But several people testified what they saw was a very believable act. You know, the guy is good. We've seen time after time examples of this. You know, these cases go by and we forget them, but we have seen countless examples of this same kind of behavior. This problem is getting larger. We have more and more folks. This used to be an extraordinarily small percentage of the population. Folks who had such impaired consciences or no conscience altogether, and who only feigned civility, but underneath had no heart whatsoever, were so malignantly self-centered and self-absorbed, and so uncaring about anything else other than their own sweet self and the satisfaction of their needs. And you know, this man in his pursuits of the day, in his sexting and whatnot, he's not looking for a meaningful relationship. He's looking for more hookups. And the woman that he claimed to want to have a relationship and raise a family with, he was already deserting her, basically, and doing his thing. These kinds of things are happening with alarming frequency. Alarming frequency. It's the elephant in the room. Character is, or the lack thereof. Character disturbance. Extreme character disturbance is on the rise. Folks with no heart, with absolutely not a care for anyone else other than their own sweet self and their own selfish desires. They don't even have a healthy self-regard. It would take some maturity for that, but they don't have that either. They eat what they want, they drink what they want, they drug what they want, they do whatever they want without any regard either really for their own well-being or for anyone else's. It's not just that the greater good is not their concern. Good itself is not their concern. Only the pleasure of the moment is their concern. Only what they want is their concern. We used to call such folks spoiled rotten. But unfortunately, we have created a cultural climate in which spoiled rotten is the new norm. Yeah, I just said that, didn't I? I dare anyone to refute it. It's the elephant in the room. And we have been in huge denial about it. It's too painful to look at. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to call out the elephant in the room. Not a law that we can fashion would fix it. You know, there is a vicious circle to this whole thing. This was another wonderful comment that someone made to the article that I wrote on my blog. Someone made the point that it's not just the culture, and actually I have said this in many articles, but the way the person made the comment would put it so succinctly. It's not just the culture and the climate that the culture has created, because the cultural climate we have got created by people. And what kind of people? Well, it got created by more and more and more, a higher and higher and higher percentage of character-impaired people. And it's a vicious circle. The more irresponsible characters you have, the more the social institutions break down and the more the culture itself changes, either to permitting, tolerating, or in some cases even rewarding character dysfunction. And then, of course, the more the cultural climate changes, the more character disturbance itself is fostered, maybe even rewarded. And it's a vicious circle. It's a vicious circle. One affects the other. And what hangs in the balance? Freedom. The survival of freedom. Because good people who are outraged by the results of character disturbance, not by character disturbance itself, but by the effects of it, by the damage that it does, by the results, by the behaviors that occur as the result of the problem. Good people who are outraged by the outrageous actions that stem from character disturbance, they feel obliged to try and do something. And in the trying to do something, inevitably, they try to basically micromanage more of people's lives, legislatively. The next thing you know, they're going to be mandating that every single parent who commutes to work and has a child in daycare must log out and check their car every 10 minutes to make sure that they didn't leave their kid in there. Now you think I'm jesting, but these are the kinds of things that happen. These are the very kinds of things that happen. We get outraged enough, and then we want to stop things from happening again, and we get into this illusion. We get into this illusion is not the right word. Delusion is the right word. We get into this crazy kind of thinking. We get deluded into thinking that we can somehow fashion enough structure and enough rules that we can prevent these things from happening, when the only thing that will ever really prevent these things from happening is making sure that we raise people who have a heart, who care about more than their sweet selves, and that we hold people accountable from an early age. And that we not only recognize, but that we reinforce character. That we make character cool again. I'm going to have a guest on the program next week, a wonderful guest who gave me that phrase to use, and I'm so glad that she did. We'll have a great time next week because my guest is going to be Tracy Sutton Shorn. She goes by the moniker Chump Lady. She has a very popular blog, chumplady.com. She's written a great new book, and we're going to be talking about that next week. So you definitely don't want to miss the show. I'm going to warn you in advance. The Chump Lady is a straight talker, and by her own admission, she has just a bit of a potty mouth. But she has just the kind of shock language that many victims of abusive relationships, folks who have been cheated on repeatedly, folks who have been poorly treated in their relationships, who have been chumped, as she would put it. She has the kind of hard-hitting, straight talk that they need. So tune in. It'll be a good show. I promise you. She'll have a lot of good things to say, and I'll welcome your calls. By the way, I forgot to invite folks to call in. if you want to say something about the topic today, freedom and character, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 717-8296. 718-717-8296 if you want to join the conversation about freedom and character. In that regard, folks, tonight we're going to close a little bit differently in a few moments when we close the show. We've got about 20 minutes to go, but I want to let you know that about 4 minutes to the ending of the show, I am going to play our theme song in its entirety for you. I was not able to work it out where our closing bumper would not play tonight, so you'll hear the closing bumper as well, but I wanted to play in its entirety America My Home, the patriotic anthem that I was inspired to write about, let's see, how long ago was it? It was 1998 that I wrote it. It was copyrighted in 1999. It was just, going to be the new millennium. We were just at the turn of the millennium. There was all these Y2K predictions and all like that. And I was doing some of my early research on the interrelationship between freedom and character because I was planning to write a book other than character disturbance, about the social causes or the social factors involved in character disturbance. I've got a call I'm going to take in now. Hang on just a sec. Hello and welcome to Character Matters.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I am calling, I'm listening to your show right now.
Yes.
And I wanted to thank you for writing the books. They have been a blessing, and
which book are you asking about now?
Well, actually, so far the two books that I've read through are Wolf in Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And they have been extremely helpful. I have actually 3 people in my life right now. One directly, 2 indirectly at the moment. And actually, all 3 are church-related.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
so it sounds like you might need to read Judas Syndrome, too.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my hands on that one yet. And I'd like to very soon. But
yeah, unfortunately, as you've discovered for yourself, unfortunately, character disturbance is a pretty widespread phenomenon these days.
Oh my goodness! And I'm listening to the latest story about the gentleman leaving his child in the car. I saw that on the news. And
yes.
I've looked at several of your periodicals between the blog and videos on YouTube. And I think the YouTube videos were the first that I came in contact with your work, but I wasn't sure how dangerous the people that it was that I'm dealing with right now. And the person that's of my main concern is a ministry leader in my church, and female, and was in leadership over my children. And she lived with us for 8 months last year. And it was through this relationship here with them living here, she and her husband, is when I discovered there was something extremely disturbing, extremely wrong. I mean, there were things like very poor planning and things like that when they weren't living here, and just things with the ministry that bothered me. But I didn't really know what I was dealing with until they came to live here, and things that really were just disturbing the relationship between she and her husband. I didn't really know much about her husband. Her husband is not a member of our church. So we didn't really know much about him. And then when they came to stay here, we realized the relationship is not all what she was making it to be, which in itself was disturbing. And and just how
Well,
she
for the
related.
benefit of the listeners, can you say a little bit about just exactly what it is that is so disturbing?
Well, the disturbing thing about the relationship with her husband, it seemed very, very estranged. You know, once you get to know people and you know their relationship with each other as a husband and wife, you would think you would see some form of intimacy. You know, a term of endearment or, you know, anything.
Uh-huh.
And there was nothing. And in fact, you know, around dinner time and we're preparing dinner, he would speak to me more than he would speak to her. And initially I thought it was some issue with him, but it really wasn't. And it wasn't really until they left the house, because it was such confusion in the home when they were here. They had to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I had to ask them to leave. But even then, I didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't until after they
Mm-hmm.
left
Mm-hmm.
is when I started putting things together. I learned about manipulative people. And then I realized it was even more than that. And I heard the introduction to, I forget the lady's name, the sociopath next door, which is some of the things that she was
Martha Stout, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with everything she's saying, but some of the descriptions she was giving just in the introduction, I've never read the rest of the book, but even just in that introduction, I was like, that's her.
Yeah. Yeah, if I may, I want to say something. She does have some very good things to say there. You know, we're kind of competitors actually in the marketplace.
Right.
My book edges hers out just a little bit, but she got an audience by basically rightfully claiming that not every sociopath or psychopath is a serial killer, that there are some, you know, who are bank executives and your neighbor
right.
could be very well one of these folks, because they have the capacity to put on this charm and this veil of civility.
Yes.
And so she had a valid point to make. Where I depart with her is she basically has, you know, one of these full-blown psychopaths lurking around every corner. And thankfully, such extreme cases are still relatively rare. The point I make in character disturbance is that there is a spectrum or a continuum of character disturbance, kind of like we know now with autism. We know that there's a spectrum, and what I think is the huge elephant in the room that we have to pay attention to is that character disturbance of some degree has now become rampant. Fortunately, not every single case is at the extreme end, but there's a spectrum there, and within that spectrum, some degree of character disturbance is present almost everywhere, and that's the really scary thing.
Yes, it is, and that's what I'm finding. And I guess I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for. I just knew that I was very uncomfortable around this person. But once I read your book, and in character disturbances, you go through all the tactics that they use, the denial, the lying, the minimizing, the diversion, the evasion. And it just all became clear. It was, you know, I could read them like a book.
Yeah, so your gut alerted you first, but then you started paying astute attention to the behaviors, and that gave you confirmation.
Absolutely, and the dilemma that I'm having now is, you know, I had to take this to the church leaders, and you know, being Christians, we want to think that people are not capable of this kind of behavior.
Yes.
So you're more likely to dismiss it. But this is going to be a case of me having to convince them that this is really a huge problem in our society, and it doesn't bypass the church at all.
Not at all.
In fact, they can hide better, you know, in a church setting, feigning to be concerned about people and wanting to do good for people, when all the while everything is centered around what benefit they get.
Yes.
For themselves.
Yes, that's very well said. Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's very well said when you said that they can hide better.
Oh, my goodness.
That doesn't,
so masterful.
Yeah, that doesn't mean by any means, does it? It does not mean that the church is just a place teeming with these kinds of nefarious characters. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that it just means that there's good cover there, and so therefore these kinds of characters have a good place to hide and a good place to look good on the surface until you start to look a little bit under the surface and see what they're really all about.
Yes, yes, and I had some questions because in two of the cases there's children involved, and with this particular person, she has an adult daughter, and you know I realized that this is something that's somewhat generational for her. Her mother, I believe, was also a character disturbed, or more or less narcissistic, and so some of it is learned behavior from the parents.
Excuse me for just 1 minute. I'm going to have to interrupt for just a second. I just want to alert you to something.
Okay.
In about 4 minutes, I'm going to do a special wrap up for tonight's program.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, but I want what you are talking about here is so important that I want you to promise that if we don't have enough time to finish, that you'll call again sometime and we'll address this.
I would love to.
Okay, great. So go ahead.
Okay. So this is a case where it's an adult daughter. She was actually in college, and one of the issues was when they were staying with us is that she could never tell me when she was coming home. And I'm a homeschooler. I have 4 small children, and I use my entire house to educate. And so I needed to prepare to receive her daughter into the household, but she could never tell me that. And I thought that was rather odd. And, you know, one day I just went on the college's website and I looked up when she was going to be on spring break. She couldn't tell me that, but I realized she could tell me that. She just didn't want to tell me that. She didn't want to make the effort to tell me that.
She evaded that, and that's one of the tactics. Yes.
Yeah, she evaded it. But, you know, at this point, I'm still in the dark. I don't know what's going on. But there was some issues with the daughter, and she would not take the daughter.
By the way, let me say something about that.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did you pick up on the tactic, but something that folks need to realize, and maybe you haven't thought of this, is that it makes no sense to use the tactic, does it? In other words, the truth would have done just fine, would it not?
Right, it would have done just fine.
Right. So doesn't that leave you wondering? Doesn't that leave you wondering? Well, why would she be evasive on this when the truth would have done just fine?
Right.
And this is something that I explain in my book. I just wanted to point that out. So go ahead. Yes. We got about 2 minutes left.
Okay. And well, by the way, you know, we had talks with her husband and her daughter. I had some run-ins with her daughter, but it was really the behavior of the mother and why. But I didn't realize that at the time. And I had a talk with her daughter, and her daughter was, I think my mother is mentally disturbed. That's what she said to me. And so that was kind of the first tipping off, but I don't think they realize. I really do believe that they are victims also, obviously, with this kind of person, but they're not quite sure what's going on either.
Yeah.
You know, they know that their life is a mess. I think they understand that, but they don't really have a name for it.
Well, I'm going to hold you to your promise. I really want you to call in again. You've got your finger on some very important things, and I can tell that you've been an astute study about this.
Oh, I have.
So I want to get some more of your comments. So I want you to promise that you'll call back in another time.
I promise, sir.
We're going to have a guest next week, so we might not have a lot of time then, but I want you to call back, okay?
Yeah, I'll call back the following week then.
Great.
I'll be listening in on next week.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome. God bless.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, it was a wonderful call. Thank you so much. Really, I really almost hated to end that, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to introduce to you the anthem for the millennium, America, My Home. I want to play it for you in its entirety. The song means a lot to me. For those of you who hear it, who have a mind to share it, please do. For those who have perhaps a mind to want to perform it, please contact me at George K. Simon at sbcglobal.net, and I'll tell you how to get a hold of it for your patriotic event so that you can perform it. We have orchestral tracks available. We have score sheets. And by the way, for you barber shoppers out there, the Barbershop Harmony Society has added it to their musical catalog as well, so you can find it there. But I want to spread the word about freedom and character and about the duty of every single person in this great country of ours to live up to this country's best ideals and preserve for our children and their children to come this freedom that we enjoy. So with that in mind, here is America, My Home.
I have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings we have known, I will honor her forever. America, my home. America, America,